Hello and welcome to this session where we're going to be talking about Microsoft 365 adoption and some of the lessons that we've learned in adopting or implementing Microsoft 365 throughout a number of organizations. And I've just called this session Lessons from the Field, and they're just really going to be looking at three key things that we've learned over the last 12 months in implementing Microsoft 365 within our client base. The first one is this one, and this is probably the most important one, that Microsoft 365 is a toolkit. It's a toolkit of things that can help you improve the efficiency of communication, collaboration, knowledge management, and security within your organization. This is one of my only slides that have got any graphics on, so enjoy that one while we're on it. But as you can see, we've got that toolkit with various tools that we can use. And I've tried to break down the tools within Microsoft 365 into a number of different categories here, so you can get some idea of the length and breadth of what's available within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. There's a selection of communication tools. I've got SharePoint in there, the Teams communities, or Yammer as it used to be called, piece which is great for communicating across larger groups of people. We've got meetings, webinars, we've got chats, and we've got various other tools that we can use, and hidden in there is Outlook, which is probably the most used communication tool within most organizations at the moment. We've then got another category of tools, which is productivity tools, and these are the ones you'll be very familiar with, things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Project, OneNote, which is a fantastic tool for taking meeting notes and notes of any kind across all kinds of platforms, including tablets. We've also got things like Planner, To-Do, and Tasks, and then some of the more comprehensive products like Power BI, Bookings, and the whole portfolio of things that the Viva solution brings into play around communication. The next couple of categories are storage. So Microsoft 365 gives us lots of places to store things, which is a great way. And these are all cloud-based storage environments. And then we've got a set of development tools, which we can use to link together all of the different, the other tools that we've looked at in the toolkit to make them work together. So Power Automate is a very simple way of grabbing information from maybe an Excel spreadsheet, creating a workflow, getting that to generate emails and link together to make a whole kind of workflow system for your organization. Power Apps is there to create more comprehensive applications. And then we can look at Power Virtual Agents, which is in effect an automatic kind of message bot creation tool. And on top of that, I've just added Azure in here, not really part of the Microsoft 365 environment, but there's a lot of integration into all of the products that are available within the Azure stack. The final bits that we've also got in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem are around management and around security. So we've got things like Azure Active Directory being an integrated part of it, which will give us that ability to manage conditional access and multi-factor authentication, single sign-on. We've got the whole suite of Microsoft Endpoint Manager, commonly known as Intune, which gives us that ability to manage remote devices and cloud-based devices across our organizations, and Windows Autopilot, which is a fantastic tool for provisioning and managing desktop and laptop and mobile devices automatically, and that has got to offer some enormous savings around the cost of management for all your devices. We've then got that whole umbrella of security that sits across Microsoft 365 around email, around antivirus, and then some of the more comprehensive ones around Azure information protection to enable you to keep your compliance in line and look after digital leak protection. And then the massive suite, which is Azure Sentinel, which allows us to monitor and manage that whole of that environment. So there's some of the tools, or most of the tools, that are in the Microsoft 365 toolkit. And this is one of the challenges we have with Microsoft 365. It's a toolkit. It's not an application. It's not like a payroll application where we install it. It gives us a screen where we can put in our employees' details, their salaries, their overtime claims, and we can press a button, and out the other end comes a payment and a pay slip. It's a more comprehensive set of tools to enable us to build solutions a little bit like that. So the problem with this is that we need to go and find out the problems that we're trying to solve with this toolkit. We can't just go and implement it as a solution. It's actually a solution to a lot of problems in our businesses. So for the first time, really, for many people, we need to come out of our IT departments and we need to go and understand what's happening within our business, because we've got a tool set that allow people to do some significant, make some significant changes in their businesses, to increase the efficiency of communication and collaboration, to help them with knowledge management, to help them with how they're moving information around the organization. So we always need to start with the problem. We need to go and find out what's happening within our business. We need to spend time with people in the business and look at the problems that they're trying to solve, because we've got a really good toolkit to go and solve those problems with. So I've just listed some typical problems that organizations have and things that they're trying to do. I'm thinking, the one that jumps out to me there is employee onboarding. To be able to simplify that onboarding process and to turn that into a computer managed procedure can have some significant benefits to an organization. So there are lots of things within our business, and what we need to do is go and spend time with the business to see what they're doing and find out the problems that they're facing, where their inefficiencies are, and then think, can we help with this set of tools that we've got? So working closely with the business, with any project, one of the first stages is really to form a project board and set some objectives for how we want to implement Microsoft 365 within the organization. Identify who the key stakeholders are. You need people on that project board who can make decisions that will stick across the whole of the organization. And the next step that we go to in this process is to just show them some examples of what can be done with Microsoft 365. So we have a number of scenarios that we can play out to them, from simply, how to increase the efficiency of meetings, how to use some of the tools within the Microsoft suite around meetings and captions and taking notes for meetings and using whiteboards. And that's one of the demonstrations we do in the Art of the Possible. And we have a number of other different scenarios. And the reason for those and the purpose for those is to get those people who are in the business and who are influential to be able to look at what Microsoft 365 could do for them, and to take those scenarios and use cases that we present as part of our Art of the Possible presentation and think about how they relate to the organization that they're in. We also encourage people to spend more time with the business, to understand the kind of shape of the organization, the culture of the organization, to understand what the capabilities are at the moment within the IT team, and where they need to be extended to better support the adoption of 365. We also need to, at the whole time we're looking at this project, consider security and data security, because we've got the potential to introduce lots of new technology into the organization, but we always need to keep an eye on the fact that we need to keep that information, the organization's information, secure. And then understand from each of the things that we find out, and each of the opportunities to use Microsoft 365 and to use that toolkit to help an organization. We then need to draw that into a plan which gives it the organization's priorities. Sometimes we'll find very simple things that we can do, which can be implemented in a very short time, that can make a significant difference to the business, and they would go to the top of the list of the the priorities of the project. And other times we know there are bigger challenges, often around data and how we're going to cleanse the data held in the organization and migrate that into the cloud so that it could be used more effectively by the organization. But the end of this process always ends up with a phased project plan, which gives us a timeline and a number of projects that we can start working on. So this is the basic, the clear message that I need to get out of this section, or wanted to get out of this section of the presentation, that implementing Microsoft 365 in your organization is a business project. It's not a technology project. Technology projects tend to be the kind of things that we've been able to do in the background for a long time, and the success of a technology project has often been that the users don't notice any change at all. If we can move their Microsoft email from Exchange into the cloud and they don't notice that anything has happened, that's considered a success with a technology project. With a business project, we need to be making sure that we're working with the users, that they're seeing the effect of that and they're involved in the process. So that's the first thing that I wanted to cover, that whole business of the fact that Microsoft 365 is a toolkit and not a solution, that you need to work with the business to find where you can apply those tools, and that this really is a business project and not a technology project. The second piece that I wanted to look at is this, that Microsoft 365 has the potential to create chaos in your organization. If it's not done properly, it's got the potential to cause incredible inefficiencies in an organization. So you need to be careful about how you do that. The main pitfalls of an unmanaged rollout, and I'm sure some of you watching will have experienced this. I know I talked to many clients who have just enabled Microsoft 365 and Teams at the beginning of the lockdown and just let it go. And it goes very, very quickly. So if you haven't set some standards, there's a lot of potential for team sprawl. I spoke to an organization the other day which had about 4 or 5 different user departments, quite a neat little organization, but they had kind of 50 or 60 teams that had been created over the last 12 to 18 months. And no one knew which team was the one to be using for a particular activity or for a particular project. And things were all over the place, and a lot of those teams had become redundant and never been retired. Second thing is misplaced information. One of the challenges is that when we introduce Microsoft 365 into an organization, we end up with lots of places to store things. If we want to work collaboratively on a document, then it needs to be in cloud storage so that lots of people can access that simultaneously. So we've got OneDrive for Business is one place things could be stored. SharePoint is another place that things could be stored, and also things can be stored within messages and things like that. So often people don't know where to go and find the authoritative document on a particular subject because it's stored in multiple places. We've got exactly the same situation with communication as well. When we introduce Microsoft 365 into an organization, we introduce lots of different ways of communicating. This leads to user frustration, people not being able to find documents, not being able to find emails, etc. And it also leads to data security challenges. And people, as they get frustrated with the environment, if it's not been implemented well and trained well, tend to go away and just create their own systems. And you get the potential for a lot of shadow IT, people just grabbing a spreadsheet and sharing it with someone else and creating a whole business system or a whole business management system just around a spreadsheet that is not helpful. So 3 things that we recommend in this area. And the first thing is very early in the project that we get a communications charter in place. As I said a moment ago, we're increasing the number of ways in which people can communicate in the organization. The majority of people, the majority of organizations at the moment are very email centric. So everything comes into your inbox. That could be an email from the managing director to all people in the organization. It could be a specific email directly to you. It could just be some spam from someone trying to sell you some cheap laptops. All of those things come into your inbox. And that becomes a little bit of a mess. One of the things we can do with introducing a lot of new communications channels into the organization is that we can break out different types of communications into different areas. And that's what a communications charter does. So if we're working with a client to do this, we look at all the different flows of information, usually looking in someone's inbox to see what type of information is coming there. And then we identify what would be a better channel for that information. It could be that, things that are going backwards and forwards in email are better off in a one-to-one chat or a one-to-many chat. It could be the all company email from the managing director talking about this month's sales figures would be better posted on an intranet and people just alerted that that's there. Or it could be that communication will, departmental communication is better communicated within a team. Things like the managing director's stand-up meetings and things like that, very easy to video those now and deliver those as live meetings or as recorded meetings. So that's what we do in this process here, and it's the first part of the kind of framework that we have in place for delivering Microsoft 365. So we identify those communication types that are happening at the moment in an organization and then map them onto new channels. And we document that. And the most important thing we do with that is we integrate that into any training that we deliver. So that could be standalone training about communication, but better if it's actually the training on how to use the application, and that we'll customize that to reflect the communications charter. The second most important thing is around a storage strategy. We need to know where we're going to be storing data, and we need to have consistency across the organization so that people know inherently where data is going to be held. We have a kind of general rules within computer world that things that are in our OneDrive for business is personal stuff and stuff that we're working on, kind of work in progress. If it gets beyond that, then it really does belong in a team, in one of our departmental teams, in the channel related to the project that refers to, so that other people can have the benefit of seeing that information, so that people can collaborate on that, and so that we know where to find it in future. So there's lots of different places where we can store information. It could be in OneDrive for Business, it could be in SharePoint, it could be within SaaS applications that we have, but it also could be within kind of legacy on-site storage devices. So we need to look at that. We need to review the retention policy for those, the security framework that data needs to be held in, and then we need to create a data migration plan. One of the things you need to do to release your data, to enable it to be used more effectively within Microsoft Teams and within the Microsoft 365 environment, is where possible, get it into the cloud. So get it into Microsoft's SharePoint databases, which sit behind Teams, or into to OneDrive. But it's important that you only take the data with you from your on-site systems that you need, and that there's a plan on how that's going to be migrated across into the cloud environment. And also we need to think about backups when we talk about that, to make sure that we're not just moving data to places that's no longer backed up. The third kind of key element of an adoption framework is to introduce some standards around teams. As I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest issues we have is kind of sprawl of teams. So we tend to recommend to organizations that they have a limited number of people who can create teams, and that there are rules put in place about when teams are created, and when channels are created within those teams, to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. So we agree a process for that. And within Computer World and within our Microsoft 365 methodology, we have a limited number of types of teams. I've just listed those on the slide there. We have departmental teams, which are teams that are permanently in place for that particular department. Everyone within that department is a member of that team, and the channels within those teams reflect the activities of that department or the current projects of that department. And in that case, we can use private channels to deliver, an area for a smaller subset of people to communicate and collaborate in a secure way within that department. We then have project teams, and these are teams that are spun up for a particular project, that have that last the duration of that project, but are then probably archived somewhere, and the data that we need from them harvested and stored in more central storage. But they are teams that are just the members of those teams are members of the project board for that team, and the people who are the key stakeholders in that team, and they might be people from across different departments. So that's where we have a standard of a project team. As soon as we want to communicate with people outside of the organization and invite them into our teams, we have a different type of team. We have a communication team, which is so that we're aware that we have internal and external members in that team. So we'll make sure that stuff that we're talking about is appropriate for that total audience of people within our organization and outside our organization. And then the fourth type of team that we have is a kind of a knowledge management team, where we want to make sure that when the things we learn as a business, as part of the process of these projects and departmental things, can be stored in a team and retrieved effectively across the organization, to make sure that we're not losing that knowledge. Other key things around team standards are naming conventions. So we have a kind of nice structure for the name of the team, so you can tell what it is, what it's about, and its purpose, just purely by looking at its name, and it's easy to search for those things. We need to manage the life cycle of those teams, as you can see within our 4 department types, our 4 team types there. Some of those that have a life cycle, they'll just last for the duration of the project. Some of them are permanent, but we do need to make sure that we've got ongoing management of teams within the organisation. And then the piece around teams governance, just making sure that we've got the rules and regulations in place for what kind of information can be discussed in there, and that slots in alongside the team security piece as well. So those were the 3 key elements of a framework that we put in place before we encourage an organisation to go ahead with their Microsoft 365 adoption. So that's your communications charter, your storage strategy, and then those teams, the conventions and rules around teams creation. The next thing, the third thing I'm going to talk about, is training. And training is so essential in this. I think one of the things that people did, especially in the advent of the lockdown, when they rolled out Teams very, very quickly, was to assume that people are going to learn how to use it very easily. You always hear these things like, no one's ever been on a Facebook training course. But I think with Microsoft Teams, it's a little bit more complicated with that, really, because you want everyone in your organization to be using it in a consistent way. So it's important to train the basics and then the more advanced stuff in the way that you want it to be used within the organization. Lots of people, if they try and learn it themselves, don't understand where the notifications. I've had people say to me, I don't, I like Teams, but it's always giving me notifications. It's always telling me this is happening and that is happening, and don't realize that there's an area where we can choose whether we want those notifications or not. Also, people say, well, everyone ignores my status. I'm busy at the moment. I'm in, my calendar's booked. I'm busy, and yet people keep calling me. To have some understanding of what those statuses are about and how they're managed, and how we should teach people as part of the culture of their organisation to respect people's statuses is really, really important. And also calendars as well. Knowing that if I block in today in my calendar as the gas man's coming to service the boiler, it's all Teams. Unless I set that as set as available within my calendar, it's actually going to block my Teams out and tell people that I'm busy all day. So just those simple little things. I had a client the other day say, I quite like the chat, but sometimes I want to put more than one line, or I want to format some text in it. Why can't I do that? And that's just a very simple button to allow you to add some formatting and turn it into an announcement within chat. So it's things like that you need to get everyone across the organization familiar with. And we do this. We deliver a training course to do this, what we call our Brilliant Basics around communication and collaboration, which covers all of the bits that I've bullet pointed on there. But it's it's a couple of probably 45-minute sessions with some time for questions at the end. And at the end of that, everyone will know how to use Microsoft Teams, how to use the brilliant basics of it across the organization in a consistent way. And then we can move on and look at the more advanced functionality. And training is an interesting one, because in the old days, we would always take people off-site or into a special dedicated training room with lots of PCs in it. And we would have to, we sit them down and provide them with some lunch and train them in a classroom-based environment. That kind of has gone now, and that's kind of a distant memory. We've back at the office, which I haven't been to for over 12 months now in Bristol. We've got 2 or 3 training rooms, but I don't imagine we will see those used in anger for that type of training ever again. So we found delivering webinar-based training very, very effective. And, wrapping that around with question and answer sessions. And if you've got a smaller group of people, we would usually say a kind of maximum of 75 people on a training course. In that environment, we can usually handle some good interactive questions. People can put questions in the chat and we can answer them. But then we'll stay on at the end of the session and answer any one-to-one sessions. We also, a short while after the training, just book in some Genius Bar sessions with people where they can book a 20-minute slot and come along with their questions and have some one-to-one help with that. We have a whole portfolio of training videos, which just a little bite-sized pieces, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, talking about how to use a particular function. And also, it's important to have some material to back that up. So we have a series of quick guides that can be loaded on any kind of learning management system, or just delivered via a simple intranet to people so they can go and have a refresher of how to use a particular function. And it's always important when you're launching Microsoft 365 within an organization to have a launch plan. So to kind of build some momentum, to make people aware of what's going to happen, get people invited along to the training sessions, help them understand what it's all about, and to deliver, use that as an opportunity to deliver training material to them. And just one last slide here, another one with some pictures for a change. And that's when you're thinking about the training, just consider the full user experience. We've been delivering some training for our housing association recently, and we realized early on in the process that 30 or 40 of their users only ever use Teams on an Android tablet because they're mobile maintenance engineers, and therefore we put together a dedicated course just for those people, which, because of the nature of their job, they wanted running kind of out of hours towards the end of the day when all their jobs are finished. And we're able to, fire up an Android tablet and do the screenshots from that and make it very relevant to the way in which they are going to be using the system. And it's, it's the same with other things. If you've got people who are mostly going to be using it on a tablet, and the training is very different to those people who are going to be using it with full Teams client and Windows 10. So just think about customizing your training experience to cover the full user experience and how people actually be using the products that we're putting in front of them. So in summary, I think hopefully you've got that message that Microsoft 365 is a toolkit and not a solution. It's important to remember that to identify that business requirement and then take the right tools in to solve that problem. There's no point in going to the toolkit, choosing the biggest hammer and going around the organization looking for nails to nail in. It's important to go around the organization, find where the problems are, and then go back to the toolkit and choose the right tools to solve that problem. Teams and Microsoft 365 has the potential to create chaos in your organization. You need to deliver it in a framework which is well defined. And we've looked at those 3 elements there: the communications charter, the storage strategy, and then standards around teams and the management of teams, the life cycle of teams. And training is not essential. It's not intuitive. It's very good, but there's lots of different ways to do the same thing. And it's really important to get the benefits of the efficient communication and collaboration and knowledge management in your organization for people to be doing things in the same way and using it consistently across the organization. So they're the 3 kind of lessons from the field that I just wanted to share with you today. I think the 4th one is this: that the secret of success in any project of this nature is not to be too ambitious. It's important to chunk the projects up into small, achievable pieces and deliver them so people start to get the benefits of the environment as quickly as possible. And then we move on to more advanced pieces. So what next? If you've got any questions, then do use this QR code below to book a session in with myself or one of my colleagues, just to look at where you are with your Microsoft 365 adoption, just to very simply review that and ask any questions that you have. But thank you very much for listening to this session. And I hope you've had some good questions on the chat as it's been going on. And feel free to reach out to us in the future if you're watching this offline. Thank you very much.